I rise to make my own contribution to the ongoing debate in this National Assembly on the bill that is shortly entitled the Appropriation 2018 Bill 2017. And I start where the Honourable Speaker left off, because I believe that those who have seen me over the years in this House would agree that I am all for extensions of time and allowing members to have as fulsome an opportunity as possible to express themselves. I listened from outside the debate in relation to the extension sought by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and member for number 6. And I came back into the room to vote no when I gathered a question was to be put and a division sought. But I think that we all owe each other and the public an obligation, Madam Deputy Speaker, to set out what the provisions of the rules are and how these provisions ought to work. And so I start by going to Rule 40, Section 40 of our rules, Section 40 of the National Assembly Elections Act, which speaks to the time limits of speeches. And I don't propose to read the entire section, but it makes it pellucid that in an ordinary debate, that is a debate that is not a budget debate, that members are limited to an hour in terms of the period of time that they're given for their presentation. In a budget debate, and that picks up at Section 40, subsection 4, and let me read it into the record. In a debate on the annual financial statement and budgetary proposals, subject to paragraph 5 hereof, a member shall not speak for more than 90 minutes unless he or she requests and obtains an extension of time in the manner prescribed by paragraphs 1 and 2 after this period has elapsed, and thereupon the Speaker shall permit him or her to speak for a further period not exceeding 30 minutes. So the rules set out a framework, Madam Deputy Speaker, for members speaking on a budget. And it tells us that members have 90 minutes and have the ability to ask the chair for additional time not exceeding 30 minutes. It goes on, because you remember that section says that it is subject to subsection 5. At subsection 5, the term limit specified in paragraph 3 shall not apply to the Minister of Finance. And the member speaking first on behalf of the opposition shall be entitled to speak for an equal period of time as the Minister of Finance, provided, however, that this period shall not be less than 2 hours. I say that to make it clear that the rules do not provide for the member speaking first on the opposition benches, in this case, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, to get any extension of time. The rules do not provide for the Leader of the Opposition or member speaking first from the opposition benches on a budget debate to ask the House for any extension of time, because the rules make a very clear distinction between what I would say ordinary members speaking on a budget, being given 90 minutes with the opportunity to ask for an extra period not exceeding half hour, and the Minister of Finance on the one hand and the first respondent in the opposition on the other. Put differently, Madam Deputy Speaker, if it was that the Minister of Finance had spoken for 3 or 4 hours, the first person to respond on the opposition benches would have had that equal time. But having had that equal time, there is no provision that would allow him or her to seek additional time in the way that it was attempted earlier. And I wanted to frame my opposition. I wanted to frame my opposition, Madam Deputy Speaker, in that context. As I said, we're all here as parliamentarians, we learn from each other, and we have an obligation, a duty, to speak in ways so that the public and the people whom we serve better understand what the rules are and how they work. And so there's no precedent nor there's any provision under our rules for any question to be put to this House for any extension of time by the leader of the opposition in the context of a budget debate, because he is already given equal time. And in fact, the framework is so clear that it says at section 40, subsection 5, that he gets equal time, provided, however, that this period shall not be less than 2 hours. So the section actually makes it quite clear that the first responder, in this case the leader of the opposition on a budget, will not be disadvantaged, because he will at least get 2 hours. Put differently, if the Minister of Finance had got up and had spoken for half an hour on the budget, the first responder on the opposition benches would be entitled to that half hour, but would be entitled at a maximum to 2 hours in that context. If the finance minister gets up and speaks for 4 hours, then the first responder, leader of the opposition, as the case may be, would also be entitled to that 4 hours. But having spoken, there is no opportunity for any question to be put. And so I wanted to make that clear, lest the House falls into some kind of disrepute. It is, Madam Deputy Speaker, an entirely separate question as to whether the Speaker, as he has said in his wisdom, would wish to grant some additional leeway to any member on the basis of interruptions or otherwise. And I'm satisfied that the Speaker in this instance, in his wisdom and in his own untrammeled discretion, offered 5 minutes for a wrap-up. I gather that time was not accepted, but then that is entirely a matter for the presenter. I would only remind the House and the nation that this House started late today, as well as yesterday, because the House was convened and had to be stood down because the honourable gentleman presented first for the opposition was not here and not yet ready to proceed. And so, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, forgive me, I wanted to just make those short points, lest, as I say, the public whom we serve were to be in some, or to have some misunderstanding as to how this process works and how this process ought properly to work. Having said that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I turn now to my substantive ministries, which are the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation. From the budget address, which we would have heard presented yesterday by our beloved Prime Minister, delivered so eloquently, I believe that it is clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this administration remains committed to its prosperity agenda and its promise to put the people of St. Kitts and Nevis first. I have had multiple occasions when I've had to explain to those who have sought to criticize this government for one thing or another, and that is to be expected. After all, we live in a very robust and sometimes cantankerous democracy. But that is as it should be. Our people should have a voice, and where you are in a democracy, criticisms will come. Criticisms, in fact, can sometimes be useful because they help to create the debate, and certainly they help to sharpen the skills of those in government and, in some instances, effect change that is necessary. I have had reason to explain that this unity administration is unique. It's historic. And it has come with what I call a two-pronged approach to governance. We have said on the one hand that we want a prosperity agenda. And so we've had as our first prong prosperity for all. And I believe, and you would have heard throughout the presentation of this budget, that we are not marking our own papers. That those who mark papers for prosperity and for economic performance have consistently found that St. Kitts and Nevis under this administration is performing better than the rest.
Where is that?
And so,
where is the proof of that?
and so, Whether one goes to the IMF, the World Bank, the Central Bank, we are ahead of the class in the region. And so, you know, I was at a particular function. I think it was the PLP convention some time ago. And they had somebody who came to give greetings. And he said that in St. Kitts Nevis, we're using a big word, Madam Deputy Speaker. A word unknown in the rest of the region. And I sat and I said, my goodness, what could this word be? Is it kakistocracy that we hear sometimes from the member from number 4? But he said, no, the word is surplus. A big word, surplus. We don't hear that word being mentioned elsewhere. And that has been now almost the expectation in St. Kitts and Nevis under this unity administration. So we have focused on the prosperity agenda. And along the length and breadth of this country, you can see the prosperity agenda at work.
10 years ago, it was deficit.
You can see it.
10 years ago, or about 5 years ago?
Mr.
5 years ago, deficit?
Madam Deputy Speaker, one can see it. And I need not get into the comparisons. I did not, because I recall sitting on those benches over there. I went over there yesterday to say hello, and my skin started to itch. I realized I am now allergic to opposition. But I recall being over there. And when I was over there, I recall one of the light moments in this house was looking across and seeing the red socks of then member and my good friend Sam Conda. And I said, you know, in every respect, the country was in the red just like Labour. Deficit after deficit after deficit, that was the order of the day. So
We'll get to it.
I don't understand why anybody can now come and say that in 2017, this year of our Lord, and for this budget, that St. Kitts and Nevis is not best in class, because we are. And it tells you that the prosperity agenda is working, and it has worked. And it justifies and explains our emphasis, Madam Deputy Speaker, on this particular approach to governance. We have said that the second prong on which we have embarked, and the second plank of our platform, that we asked the people of the country to give us the opportunity to govern on, is the good governance agenda. And some have said, oh, which should have come first and which should have come second. But the reality is, we always said to the people of the nation that we would do these two things: a prosperity agenda and a good governance agenda. And I'm satisfied that the Honorable Attorney General and the Cabinet have now initiated and embarked upon the necessary work to bring the good governance agenda to fruition. Two planks, and we have and are entitled to, as a government, to order the affairs of the government in a manner that we think will bear the best fruits for the country. That is the prerogative of any government. And so we thought that we ought to focus initially on prosperity, bringing prosperity to our people. And I can go on and on and on about the number of people who would have benefited. With the Fresh Start program, I know, because I assisted some entrepreneurs from Nevis, young people who have been given not a handout but a hand up. I like to talk about it. Not a handout, Madam Deputy Speaker, but a hand up. And people in Nevis and in St. Kitts throughout the length and breadth have benefited from that initiative. I believe the first tranche of funds was exhausted, and we made provision for a second tranche of funds. People investing in the country, investing and getting an opportunity to own their own business. We talk about the cruise industry. My brother from number 4, the Honorable Minister of Tourism, is not a man given to pounding his chest. But I have asked him time and time again, why is more not being said in terms of the phenomenal outturns in cruise and the cruise industry? I saw him with some numbers recently, and I believe, if my memory is correct, that we were looking, in terms of the scheduled calls and the capacity of these ships, somewhere in the region north of 1.5 million cruise passengers for this season. 1.5 million. I want people to think about that. You know why I want people to think about it? Because we were fooled, and the nation was fooled into believing that somehow it was some magic of Labour that had cruises coming to the country. And we heard people taking credit, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the cruise industry. But for how long will you take the credit? We're now 3 years into it and the numbers keep going higher. Yes, I am sure that there's some spillover because of damage to other jurisdictions. But we ought not to use that to somehow diminish the work of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and his team. And I commend them because tourism continues to be the backbone of our economy and tourism continues to perform and perform well. Prosperity. Prosperity. Look at the taxi operators. Look at the opening of new hotels. The employment opportunities that have been created. When I listened to the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance present, and he said that people were leaving Four Seasons in Nevis, getting a better offer at the New Park Hyatt, better wages. That is what you need in the country. And because of unity, and because of the feeling now that people are one, that people feel comfortable flowing back and forth, because there is also movement from St. Kitts to Nevis, and from Nevis to St. Kitts. That is as it should be. Whether you find a job in Sandy Point or you find one in Newcastle, as a national of the country, you should be able to work freely wherever you choose and wherever the opportunities present themselves. And the people are demonstrating that, Madam Deputy Speaker. The media has been inundated with news that President Trump, our good friend to the north, plans to raise taxes that will ultimately hurt the finances of the vast majority of Americans, particularly the middle class. Americans, as we know, are somewhat schizophrenic about taxes. They argue about it back and forth. Different people have different philosophies about taxes. But look at the contrast. Right here in St. Kitts and Nevis for, let's see, 2015, 2016, 2017. For the third time, we have had a budget presented in this House by a Team Unity administration, which is a tax-free budget. Tax-free. It means that we are saying to our people and to the business community that as a government we are managing the fiscal affairs of the country in such a way that we need not, Madam Deputy, go to them and increase any burden on them. We are managing the fiscal affairs of the country well. And so the people here need not worry because this budget poses no threat of any new taxes. There have been no new taxes and no hike in taxes. Rather, several mechanisms will be created within the various governmental agencies, including our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for our citizens to grow and to prosper. We have seen, Madam Deputy Speaker, an amount of some $18.7 million that has been allocated to my ministries for the upcoming fiscal year. And whilst I think it should be a lot more because our work is that important, I am grateful to the Minister of Finance and to the team for investing in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation. 2017, globally, ushered in a slew of surprising evolutions and revolutions. Career businessman and first-time politician Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States. We saw populism spreading across Europe. There appears to be no waning of the refugee crisis. The uncertainty that the British people plunge Europe and the rest of the world into with Brexit, that persists. Terrorist attacks, Madam Deputy, continue to intensify throughout Europe and elsewhere. Leadership is changing rapidly in Africa and across the globe. And in our own hemisphere, the Venezuelan situation shows no sign of abating. It is in the midst of these global challenges and more that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation renews its confidence in its role as a critical government ministry, department, and machinery, observing, analyzing, and advising on how to navigate the current global tides to avert negative ramifications on our citizens, our society, and our economy. The year 2017 provided multiple opportunities to engage bilaterally and in multilateral settings with a wide array of countries with disparate perspectives. Yet, through interventions and presence, we were able to impact on deliberations to find solutions that will mitigate hostility and conflict. Friendship, Madam Deputy Speaker, is best appreciated when one experiences difficulties and has a shoulder to lean on, a hand to hold, and a well-needed show of moral and other support. The ministry understands this dynamic very well and is intent on securing allies from all areas of the world who can act as that pillar of strength in our time of need. And even if there is no time of need, who can act on issues that are important to us. And I can think, for example, of the whole issue of climate change, an issue in which the voice of St. Kitts Nevis, a small country, but a voice that has been sounded loudly across the world and in the corridors of power all across the world. St. Kitts and Nevis's voice in multilateral and bilateral forums has been heard on this important issue. We understand this dynamic. In fact, the Cabinet's mandate to me as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Aviation was to go forth, go into the world, widen and broaden the diplomatic footprint of St. Kitts and Nevis, and bring us new friends, because you see, Madam Deputy Speaker, the world, we say, and perhaps it's now tried to say, has changed, and it continues to change. The world now has shrunk because of technology, because of the ease of travel, and our old allies sometimes are not as ready, not as willing, and in some cases not as able to assist as they used to in the past. I had occasion to interact with our dear friends from Canada at a recent forum. And I reminded Canada and the Canadian Foreign Minister that there was a time in this country when we went to schools built by Canada. We had school buses donated by Canada. Yes. I grew up, well, they're supposed to drink it, but I used to eat it, something called milk powder that we came from Canada. Some herring, red herring, saltfish, all kinds of things we used to get from Canada. And I said, traveled, of course. I was getting there, Mr. Prime Minister, because we could have traveled easily. That was the level of connection and connectivity that we had with Canada. And I said to her, Madam Foreign Minister, in my view, Canada had retreated from the region. Because what happens now with many large countries is they engage with us only at the multilateral level. They are no longer interested in necessarily coming to Bastia to meet and to discuss issues at the bilateral level. So many of them, even in terms of aid, what they do, they give some package to CARICOM or to the Caribbean Development Bank. And they say, well, we have done our bit for the Caribbean. And we have seen an erosion in terms of the value of bilateral relations. And that is why the wisdom of this cabinet and the wisdom of this unity government was to go forth and find friends, renew our relationship with old friends, and find new friends. And that is what we've done. And that is what we will continue to do. This is the underpinning, you see, of the ministry's continued thrust to solidify our relationships with a broad spectrum of countries. Although we may not be as visible as other ministries, I mentioned my colleague Minister of Tourism from number 4. I can mention my colleague Minister from number 1 in terms of infrastructure. We may not be so visible. My ministry is not involved with large projects and buildings and cruise ships that the public sees, but we play a critical role. We play a critical role behind the scenes through the art of diplomacy. And I want to, as I do every year, commend Permanent Secretary Kebas, our ambassadors, high commissioners, our foreign service officers, our entire team. Because for a small team, in a relatively small ministry, I feel we punch well above our weight. And what we have done very quietly, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to re-engage with the world. People say we're not hearing much about St. Kitts and Nevis in the context of its relations with other countries. And I said, but that is what good diplomacy does. You have not heard any scandals in 2.5 years now of this unity administration. I am delighted to report to the House and to the nation that we are at peace with all nations. And our relations are excellent with everyone. We have no difficulty with any of our colleagues regionally or internationally. I'm hearing some whispers saying our relations, even with Dominica, are good. And that is as it should be. As it should be. You know, if I might digress for a moment, I like being in this house, you know, Madam Deputy. The joy you get from not just representing people, but even sometimes the exchanges between colleagues. Because as I heard the honourable member from number 6 phone ringing earlier, a funny ring. And I heard somebody say the phone was ringing in Creole. Creole, the only thing left for him to do is pick up and say, Sakafet. Bouger. Because that is the sort of picong you get sometimes, but sometimes even though it's picong, there's some serious underlying issues. And those issues, I'm sure, will be ventilated here and elsewhere in the fullness of time. But we are at peace and we have goodwill with all nations. We do not now have any Secretary of State from the United States sending us offensive letters.
Yes.
We do not have the Canadian government putting out any press releases on St. Kitts and Nevis. We are working hard to repair relations, and I'm exceedingly proud of the record that we have had as a government. We believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation continues to play a pivotal role in advancing the interests of the government and people of the Federation. And I put a punctuation mark there to say that we are advancing the interests of the people of the Federation. And I like to remind people, because sometimes when I hear the natural neighbors of negativity, as they engage in the constant bash, not one idea, just a constant barrage of abusing and cussing and saying all that is wrong with the country, forgetting that there's so much right with our beautiful country. And as I listen to them, these natural neighbors of negativity, they keep saying, Mark Brantley travels. Mark Brantley is on a plane. I remind them all the time that my ministry is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You know the word foreign means? It means not local. So there are occasions when I will have to travel to engage. The world comes to us on occasions, and there are other occasions when we must go to the world. And which foreign minister, anywhere in the world, does not on occasions travel, whether it is to the United Nations or the OAS, or to various bilateral and multilateral fora? That is the nature of the job. So when I hear people continue to say these things, I wonder sometimes, do they think that we can conduct a foreign policy for St. Kitts and Nevis sitting at home? We must reach out to the world, because the world is reaching out to us, and we must respond in kind. We engage foreign governments. We engage our diplomats. We establish a connection, a relationship, which leads to tangible results, such as the donation of ambulances, school buses, computers, scholarships, police stations. Sometimes, you know, because, as I say, diplomacy, if done well, is done quietly. Sometimes our people enjoy the benefits of diplomacy and the benefits of the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation without even recognizing. You see, when the cruise ship comes and the passenger comes off and gets into the taxi, it is more tangible. You see it immediately. But when a young man or a young woman gets an opportunity, as two recently from Nevis, coincidentally, were able to go off to India for some training. And when I saw a photo of these two youngsters, both from very humble backgrounds and circumstances, posing with the Taj Mahal in India at their back, I said to myself, this is the value of our diplomacy. When I go to Taipei and I see the numbers of our students down there from all parts of the country getting an education, that is the value of our diplomacy. And when we look, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the engagements with the rest of the world that would allow a little country such as St. Kitts and Nevis to make history and gain a position on one of the most important bodies at UNESCO, that is diplomacy at work.
Yeah.
You see, when I say we are punching well above our weight, it's because we are.
Yes.
Not just on our prosperity agenda and the economy, where we are best in class, but also in relation to our outreach. And I feel, Madam Deputy Speaker, very, very good, very pleased, very proud that when St. Kitts and Nevis engages with the rest of the world, when we engage with CARICOM, that the voice of St. Kitts and Nevis is not only listened to, it is sought after.
Yes.
They want to know what St. Kitts and Nevis has to say.
Yes.
They want to know what we have to contribute because of the standard and the quality that we bring to the debate and to the discussion. Mr. Speaker, since I have been entrusted with the care of these ministries, St. Kitts and Nevis has been able to forge closer ties with well over 20 new countries. I say new, simply meaning that hitherto we had no diplomatic relations with them. In this year alone, we have been able to conclude diplomatic relations with 9 countries, a majority of which are located in Asia. It is no secret that Asia is on the rise. A BBC Business article in October 2017 reported that South Korea's KOSPI sits at a record. Japan's Nikkei index is above a 2-decade high. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is around a 10-year peak, while markets in India, Taiwan, and Indonesia, among the others, scaling fresh heights. The economic outturns that we're seeing in Asia, is one of the reasons, Madam Deputy Speaker, why the ministry has been charged to lead the Federation's thrust into new frontiers in Asia and previously uncharted territory for many of our citizens. Our newly established links include Bolivia in South America, Ethiopia and Mozambique in Africa, Armenia, Brunei, Laos, and Turkmenistan in Asia, Moldova in Eastern Europe, and Qatar in the Middle East. Mr. Speaker, you will note that many, if not all of these, are non-traditional relationships. Since the onset of globalization, you will appreciate how small the world has become, and this first step of forging new relationships holds untold potential for deepened and broader relations. Some of these countries have vast resources and affluent citizens who are eager to invest in our Federation. Indeed, a news clip or article about the establishment of diplomatic relations may quite likely ignite that first flicker of interest in our Federation and inspire many of their citizens to visit, explore, and invest. Madam Deputy, it must go on record that these 9 countries now bring the number of countries with which the Federation has established diplomatic relations since my relatively brief tenure as Foreign Minister to 23. I'm very proud of that, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is testimony to the fact that the Team Unity government is about delivering on its promise to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and its people, putting its people first by improving the image of our country, which unfortunately, prior to our time, was brought into disrepute.
Yes.
In the context of visa waivers, the ministry has continued to engage in its own bilateral negotiations to minimize the hassles of our citizens as they globetrot, whether for business or for pleasure. We have recorded relatively good success, having added countries to the list of those for which our citizens can travel visa-free. Our missions have been integral in this endeavor and have performed with merit in this regard. Madam Deputy, you will appreciate that given the rise in terrorism and terrorist attacks at airports worldwide, countries are naturally cautious about protecting their borders and in many instances have been reluctant to remove travel restrictions, including waiving visas. Despite that fact, our citizens, the good people of St. Kitts and Nevis, have in large measure been allowed through negotiations carte blanche to access many countries of the world. And this, I believe, has to be put in that context of global insecurity. It speaks to the level of confidence that countries have in St. Kitts and Nevis, in our safety and security, in the safety and security of our passport regime, that they will say to us, come my brothers, come my sisters, pass freely across our borders. If you wish to come for business or pleasure, you are free to come. And we have said thank you, because we recognize that this is a product of trust, mutual trust and confidence, Madam Deputy, that the world has now re-engaged with St. Kitts and Nevis in a tangible way. And the world, through these actions for visa waiver and the like, is saying that they have confidence in St. Kitts and Nevis and confidence in this Team Unity administration. Some countries are interested in waiving visas only for those who have diplomatic passports and those who have official passports. Wherever possible, we have insisted that all passport holders be offered the same privileges. And we continue to lobby and to advocate for all of our citizens, regardless of the type of passport, to be granted visa-free access. This year, we have been able to add Indonesia, Sierra Leone, and Russia. I was hopeful that by the time we came here, we would have added India, another important country, one of the so-called BRICS countries. We have, of course, Brazil, and we have now Russia. But sadly, the time has not yet come. And so we wait. But we have many more that are pending and we're told should be concluded shortly. You will recall, Madam Deputy Speaker, that earlier this year, Nomad Capitalists ranked 199 countries corresponding to their value of citizenship. Of the countries ranked, the St. Kitts and Nevis passport was the second highest rated, with a world ranking of 50, behind only the Bahamas, which had a rank of 47. And I believe that that is important.
Very important.
Very, very important.
Integrity of the passport.
St. Kitts Nevis. This is, again, let me go back. This is not Unity Mark in its own paper. This is an external agency, external to us. And what they're saying is that of 199 countries, we were ranked the second highest in the Caribbean with a world ranking of 50, and only the Bahamas were ahead of us. And I've asked the office to send off to all of these ranking agencies the fact that we've, since then, added new countries that we can now travel to without a visa. And I want the general public to appreciate the value of that work, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because oftentimes, when these press releases go forth, I hear the response. Indeed, when we concluded the arrangements with Russia, and I sat with the Foreign Minister of Russia, His Excellency Sergei Lavrov, and we had the meeting, we concluded this relationship that had been in the works for about a year. And it concluded, of course, with the fact that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis can now travel to Russia. I believe the next World Cup, FIFA World Cup, is in Russia. Yeah. And so our people who are football fanatics can now travel there, just show their passport. And be told, welcome my brother, welcome my sister, come and enjoy the World Cup. You don't have to send your passport now all around the world with picture and money to get any visa. But when the news broke, I was amused and bemused because I hear this cacophony of sound and fury. The usual natural neighbors of negativity, they start to say all kind of things about Russian elections. They say Russia going to hack the Nevis Island elections. Russian elections, that is what they start to go on radio and television to talk about. Who want to go to Russia? Nobody want to go to Russia. We want to go to Canada. We want to go to America. In fact, to my amazement, one individual sought to lambaste me, poor me, and said to me, how come we can't go to Canada? I said, what I have to do with that? We used to go to Canada without let or hindrance. It is the actions of a reckless government that has created the impasse with Canada, and that was not our government. We removed that government and we have now been trying to rebuild the relationship, Madam Deputy Speaker. But there are people out there who seem to me to wish to rewrite history. Indeed, it is in this very house, if my colleagues recall, that the then Douglas-led administration sought to persuade us and the nation that losing visa-free access to Canada was no big deal. In fact, the way the then foreign minister put it, one would have thought it was a privilege that we now had to apply for a visa, because he said we joined 100 and something other countries. I remember well, because I sat here and I thought to myself, in what world, in what universe could losing a privilege be a good thing? So now I hear them saying, oh, Mark Brantley and unity, Timothy Harris and unity, we can yet go back to Canada without a visa. And my response to them always is the same. We ought not to have lost the privilege in the first place. Had we conducted our foreign policy in a sensible manner, we would not have lost the privilege in the first place. Our passport, notwithstanding now the fact that we have competition, the Citizenship by Investment Program, another innovation that the small nation of St. Kitts and Nevis gave the world. Yes. When we started with the Citizenship by Investment Program, nobody else in the world had thought of it. Yes. It is something that started here, and something I think that we ought to keep reminding our people and others, that what we see around the world, because not only in the Caribbean now, but around the world, are various attempts at duplicating the program, the idea that St. Kitts and Nevis gave to the world. And that is using our citizenship in such a way as to advance the development of our country. Never thought of before we introduced it in 1984. Now we see other countries doing it. And the passport ranking is important. I'm bringing the point home now, Madam Deputy. It is important because the more powerful your passport is, the more desirable it becomes. The more desirable it becomes, the more people would want to invest in your program to have access to your passport. And so we are working primarily to ensure that our people can travel freely across the globe. I want to get to a point where when my tenure as foreign minister is done, that my good friend the senator opposite can simply take up a dart, close his eyes, and throw it at the globe. And wherever it lands, he knows he can go there without a visa. That is my goal. That is the goal of Team Unity. That we are creating the necessary environment in which our people can travel without let or hindrance. And that, to my mind, is an important objective. Our passport is the highest ranking passport in the OECS, the 6th strongest passport in the hemisphere, and the 4th in Latin America and the Caribbean. That's important for our people to know. That this document that you hold, that we all hold dear, that we, those of us who are committed to our country, are not prepared to go and swear any allegiance or any oath to any other. Because this is our country, and that document that we hold, that is the evidence of our citizenship, that that document is now the highest ranking in the OECS.
Yes.
Imagine you have the passport in your pocket. That's the highest ranking in the OECS, and you're going to take another passport from another OECS country, which rank lower than yours. I don't know, I'm just saying, if that were to happen, that would be a tragedy. But imagine that. We are fighting to ensure that St. Kitts Nevis, petitions and divisions of passport, we are constantly rising. Fourth in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. Second in the Caribbean. First in the OECS. And you have our own nationals who are saying they prefer to go to other lands and get their passport, which can't take them as far as our passport can take them. This is data, and it is noteworthy that other firms, Henley and Partners, Art and Capitals, Capital World Passport Index, they all confirm these results. In 2016, the Passport Index indicated that our passport had visa-free access to 124 countries. I emphasize countries because that does not include the territories that we can also access without a visa. This year we have increased our score by 3 points, and we're now at 127 countries. And these countries, let me point out, it's not any necessarily small. All countries are important. But when we, for example, sit with a Russia, we sit with an Indonesia, and then Indonesia is a member of the G20. These are countries with vast populations and vast resources that we can now leverage. When I sat with the foreign minister of Russia, we talked about training. I said to him that I was concerned that in a previous dispensation, when you had the Soviet Union and America in the Cold War era, when the Caribbean clearly was a strategic region, geopolitical region, that you had people from the Caribbean being offered training in Russia, university, engineers, that there were people in our region who spoke fluent Russian, and that our young people now needed once again, in this new dispensation, to be able to access training, access language. Language, is going to become a critical currency going forward. Our young people must be equipped with the tools to make it in this world, because the world now is not only about Basti and Charleston. And that is the type of discussion that we had. And I was pleased to hear him say that, yes, opportunities will be provided and training provided, particularly in fire and rescue and in security in Russia for our people. And this is what we seek to do when we go out and we engage. The rankings of our passport are relevant to our Citizenship by Investment program. It makes it more competitive. Our robust, focused, and determined efforts to enlarge and expand our diplomatic footprint through direct engagement have been a contributing factor to this great achievement, Madam Deputy Speaker. We do not intend to relent on this initiative. We continue to commend our diplomatic corps, concentrated in various jurisdictions around the globe, for remaining fervent and committed to this endeavor. Let me talk a bit about Canada. The hallmark for us in 2017 was the official opening of the High Commission in Ottawa. Again, I want the House and the nation to recognize the importance of that initiative. No other country in the Eastern Caribbean has a High Commission in Canada. None. Not only do we now have a High Commission in Canada as St. Kitts and Nevis, we continue, of course, to have our consulate in Toronto. So we have the High Commission in Ottawa, we have the consulate in Toronto. No other. In fact, you could imagine how I felt to be contacted by one regional leader. He didn't even send his foreign minister to call. He himself called and asked, could they get a little desk in the St. Kitts Nevis High Commission office in Ottawa. Yeah. We are leading the pack. And I want to make that clear because our people should feel proud of the efforts being made by this government. Excellent. We are leading the pack. We can recall vividly
all you're doing?
Let me go back to it. That fateful day in November of 2014,
Somebody
when we awoke to the sad news that we would now require a visa to enter Canada. And you remember the reasons? What the reasons Canada gave? Somebody showed up at the border in Canada, claimed that they are diplomat.
Patches. You got a check from the hospital?
Sure.
More than the double.
More than the double.
So, but I like the house, you know. It's a good place.
Pass ID, because show more than double for 5 years. Pass ID.
So, Madam Deputy Speaker,
Divided by a month's salary.
my math isn't so good. What do you say? Math was a weakest strong point?
Strong point, yeah.
My math is not so good. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we recall the day,
Huh? 20-something months?
and the Canadians made it quite clear what the reasons were. The reason why we lost visa-free access to Canada was a breakdown in the relationship between the then government and the Canadian government. A then government which was so arrogant that it could not see and understand the value of that relationship. And I have had calls, and I've said it before in the House, I'm going to say it again. I have had calls from citizens right here in St. Kitts and Nevis who say that they have a relative who has passed in Canada. They can't go for the funeral. People who have been accustomed to go to Canada for Caribana, to go and see their relatives in Toronto, they can't go now because there is a very difficult process to apply for a visa. You have to send Trinidad and spend money, all because of the Douglas. That is the legacy. I hear the Prime Minister all the time talking about legacy. That is the legacy. And that is what we've met and that we're continuing to try and deal with. And so when we opened the High Commission in Ottawa, it was a giant leap forward at considerable expense to the taxpayers of the country to say to Canada, St. Kitts and Nevis is serious about our relationship. And we're going to use this High Commission as a springboard to re-engage with Canada in a meaningful way. And I'm telling you, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am not a soothsayer, but I'm prepared to say in this House today, as we approach the end of 2017, that I believe that our efforts will bear fruit. Our Prime Minister has gone himself. So important is our understanding of our relationship with Canada that he has gone personally and engaged on this matter, not once, but more than once. Our High Commissioner has been engaging on the matter. I, as Foreign Minister, have engaged on the matter. And this entire government is committed to restoring and repairing our relationship with our longtime friend Canada. We cannot turn back the clock. The bad thing that happened in 2014 happened. Our presence in Canada now is designed to enhance that relationship and to repair the damage that was hitherto done. Canada, as we know, has for decades been a key partner in economic and infrastructural development. Engaging with Canada, in Canada, with Canada, in Canada, sends an inimitable message that we're eager to forge even deeper ties. I want to thank our High Commissioner there, Her Excellency Shirley Skirt, who along with a very small team has been able to meet with top officials in the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. I have already expressed my thanks to our Honourable Prime Minister because he too has led from the front, meeting not only with ministers but also with the Prime Minister of Canada himself. We continue to make inroads to understanding the decision of the former Canadian administration to impose visa restrictions on holders of our passport. Even as we work with the Canadian authorities to iron out some of the concerns, with a view to having our visa-free privilege to Canada restored, we continue to also pursue unexplored areas for meaningful cooperation. Let me turn quickly, Madam Deputy, to our staff. Clearly, none of what we do would be possible without the dedicated staff at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation. They are absolutely crucial if we are to sustain the momentum that we've had. Throughout the year, officers have participated in a number of courses which range from areas of aviation, security and diplomacy to culture and language. Ms. Touvia France, enabling closer cooperation, diplomatic training for diplomats from the Caribbean, Central America, Colombia, and Venezuela in The Hague. Mr. Sheldon Henry, he attended the 64th professional course for foreign diplomats in India. Mr. Samuel Berridge, he attended the National Development Course in the Republic of China, Taiwan. Mr. Royston Griffin and Mr. Arthur Jordan, civil aviation officers, they participated in a drone seminar. Oh Lord, I don't want to talk about drones, but a drone seminar in Antigua and an aviation instructor training in St. Lucia. Madam Deputy Speaker, running concurrent with this budget session is a training in protocol spearheaded by the ministry. I understand approximately 50 public servants are receiving this training together with the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation. And just so I make it clear, and when we talk about training, we're training nationally. Because in these training programs, we also include persons from the Premier's ministry in Nevis. That is unity at work. That is the promise of this government. We want to thank the Office of the Prime Minister and the National Security Advisor, Major General Stuart Saunders, because through them we have been able to partner with the Chief of State Protocol and a Deputy in the Office of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Ambassador Eleanor Felix and Mr. Nicholas Horton. I wish to express sincere appreciation to the Government of Jamaica for lending us their best in the area of protocol for the training, and from which a broad spectrum of our public sector has benefited and will continue to benefit. It is the Ministry's hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, that many of the trainees will now commit to serving in national events to further hone their newly acquired skills. General duties. Throughout the year, staff of the ministry has been occupied and has been instrumental in facilitating the accreditation of a number of heads of missions to the Federation. This is customary diplomatic process whenever there is a rapprochement between states. Among the heads of missions facilitated, 6 countries accredited a head of mission to St. Kitts and Nevis for the first time. These were the Czech Republic, Guatemala, Kosovo, Panama, and Qatar. And that again, the number of countries now accrediting diplomats to St. Kitts and Nevis is again indicative of the value that they place on the relationship and the growth and stature, in stature of St. Kitts and Nevis insofar as its diplomacy is concerned. This year the ministry had to officiate for 2 state funerals. These occurred in very quick succession and the officers had to mobilize themselves on others rapidly. The ministry continued to assist in general protocol matters for several national events hosted, including Independence and the annual Memorial Day service. I take this opportunity to congratulate the entire staff of the ministry again for their continued diligence and commitment to their duties. It is a relatively small staff, but continues to punch well above its weight. I must also mention, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this year St. Kitts and Nevis appointed its 2nd ambassador to Cuba and the first female in the person of Ms. Verna Mills Morris. I believe that that again is demonstrative of us putting our people first. And I know that Her Excellency Verna Mills Morris will do and has been doing an incredible job as our representative in Cuba. We also posted 2 officers overseas, the person of Mr. Bjorn Hazel to our embassy in Washington, D.C., and Ms. Asha D'Souza to our permanent mission in New York. Contributions to regional international organizations. Madam Deputy Speaker, most of our population will be aware that St. Kitts and Nevis is a member of a vast number of regional and international organizations. What they may not know is that we contribute to the budget of many of these, and every year we remit funds to these respective entities. These are called your contributions or your quota payments. Of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not the focal ministry for all of these organizations, but we are responsible for the contributions and we thus budget for them annually. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, forgive me, our quota payments amount to almost 25% of our total recurrent expenditure, totaling some $4,100,000 $436,043.71. You may be pleased to know that we are not in arrears in any of the organizations in which we proudly hold membership.
Not like them at all.
Not in arrears in any of the organizations. And I tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I am privileged to attend multilateral forums and hear this debate and look even around our region at some of the countries that are not just in arrears, but in arrears for years, little St. Kitts and Nevis doesn't owe a soul. We are up to date, and all of these are indications of a serious government at work. It was a tragedy, the recent hurricanes. Devastated our neighbors, but also, of course, damaged us. And we were in the curious situation, Madam Deputy Speaker, because notwithstanding we ourselves suffered damage, it's almost as if we could not cry out because others suffered more than us. I was reminded by one youngster in Nevis. He said, well, if you lost a finger, it's a tragedy. But if the other person lost the entire arm, maybe if you cry out about your finger, people will say that you're being callous. But we did suffer damage. And we must not run away from the fact that our obligation, first and foremost, is to our people. Yes. That is why we elected. Yes, we are sympathetic. And yes, as the Prime Minister would have set out, we have sent considerable sums to our neighbors in the region to try and help and alleviate their suffering. But at the same time, we too suffer damage. And even now, we have people in St. Kitts and Nevis who still have not been made whole. Poor people. People who would have suffered damage to their homes and not have the resources to effect the repairs immediately. And I'm happy that this caring government is working hard to ensure that our people, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, and 3 by 3, are being made whole and are being assisted in a tangible way. So one of the things we did, we went out and we engaged with the world. We not only expressed our deep appreciation to countries, and we do so now again, who have committed funds to relieve countries affected by the hurricanes this year. And whilst I was at the United Nations this year for the annual debates, I can tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that many countries came. United Arab Emirates, India, different countries came, and Australia, and they offered different amounts to the region. And for that, we are grateful and we must recognize them. We are, however, aware that at the bilateral level, we have had commitments from Pakistan, US $200,000. Qatar, US $100,000. Kuwait, US $100,000. We have also been informed that Spain has made a donation of 50,000 euros to the Red Cross of St. Kitts and Nevis, and Switzerland indicated that it had committed 100,000 Swiss francs to the Red Cross of Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis. Again, in the scheme of the damage suffered, not large sums, but certainly sums that demonstrate that our partnerships with countries as disparate as Pakistan and Switzerland were bearing fruit for the benefit of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. We are aware that recovery from natural disasters, the likes of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, require resources and support. And we use this rostrum, Madam Deputy Speaker, to thank all of our friends and partners around the world who have already donated. And for those who are intending to commit, we welcome them also and thank them in advance for their kindness and generosity. Let me switch quickly to aviation. The context of aviation. One of the landmark achievements for the civil aviation this year was the enactment of the agreement establishing the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority, or ECA. That agreement was signed on the 21st day of October 2003, and for 14 long years, that agreement was shelved and forgotten by the former administration. All that was needed was for the bill to be debated in Parliament, read, and be incorporated into our domestic law. The agreement which sought to ratify the establishment of the Sub-Regional Authority on Aviation Security, and which the Team Unity Administration deemed critical for the region and indeed for the Federation, was adopted into our national law as Act Number 2 of 2017. A government, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is working for the people. Not shelving critical legislation for 14 years, but bringing it forward, bringing it to the Parliament and enacting it. Our aviation department was able to conduct training for 550 persons from both public and private entities in aviation security, covering topics such as insider risk, screening, basic 1, 2, 3, crisis management, and cargo safety. I am pleased to report to the House and to the nation that as a consequence of the training of staff of KDP Enterprises and Cajola Cristada, the former is now the only regulated agent in the OECS, while the latter is now the only certified known consignee in the OECS. Strides, giant strides for our little country. The training, Madam Deputy Speaker, is administered in accordance with ICAO standards. Our Department of Aviation also facilitated renewal of licenses for airlines and conducted weekly inspections at ports in the Federation. As is customary, the TSA made 2 visits for inspection purposes to the Federation during the first and third quarters, respectively. Whilst the first visit was to audit the airlines operating flights to and from the United States, the second visit in August this year focused on security measures in place at both the RLB and the Vance Amory International Airport. I am happy to report that again the Ministry and specifically the Aviation Department facilitated the visits and they were generally successful. This year, our Aviation Department has issued 17 landing permits for the year to date, with 14 renewals, 2 new cargo air carriers, namely Northern Caribbean Transport International LLC and Express Carrier LLC, 1 new route by Delta Airlines JFK St. Kitts. Air Sunshine was approved as a new passenger air carrier to operate between St. Kitts and Nevis and St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It is very encouraging to the Ministry to receive a request from the Dominica Air and Seaport Authority for our civil aviation officers to conduct training for their staff. Let me say that again. Dominica has asked for our help to train their staff. Means that we are punching again well above our weight. Maybe we should send in the member from number 6 to assist in training. Well above our weight. Because others are coming and seeking our assistance, Madam Deputy Speaker, to deal with issues of training and issues of development in their respective countries. Due to the catastrophic Hurricane Maria, which practically destroyed our sister Dominica, the training has been postponed for next year. So though small, and this is the point, though small, we continue to produce and make strides for our Federation, and we continue to stand out as a valued member of the community of nations, regionally and internationally. What are our initiatives then for 2018? Come to Canada initiative. I am pleased to announce, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Ministry has already begun discussions with the Canadian High Commission in Barbados to launch a Come to Canada initiative. This will showcase opportunities for work and scholarship in Canada, and the event is tentatively slated for the first quarter of 2018. More in-depth information will be forthcoming early in the new year. The year ahead offers a slate of opportunities for the Ministry to collaborate and to engage with interstate agencies, regional institutions, and international entities on a vast array of issues on the international agenda. Collaboration on the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Activities surrounding the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda will feature prominently on the Ministry's calendar for 2018. Achievement of the SDGs is a feat that will require gusto, energy, and resources of multi-stakeholders. The Ministry stands ready to partner with the Ministry of Sustainable Development to craft a clear and definitive path towards achievement of the SDGs and to lend the necessary support to ensure that the SDGs are incorporated into every facet of its work. St. Kitts and Nevis will preside over the Regional Trading Institution CARI Forum during the upcoming year. The Ministry looks forward to partnering with the Ministry of Trade to ensure that we have a successful and productive year, and I publicly pledge my support to my colleague and brother minister, the member for number 4, in this regard. The Cotonou Agreement will expire in 2020, and as deliberations ensue regarding its successor, the Ministry desires to remain current and engage in all the issues pertaining thereto to ensure that the interests of the Federation and its people are safeguarded. Further, Madam Deputy Speaker, Europe will confirm how it will interact with members of the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group, so-called ACP Group, even as the configuration of the group continues to occupy the thoughts of technocrats, diplomats and politicians across the respective geographic areas. As negotiations heighten regarding the future of this long-standing union, the Ministry will persist in its support for maintenance of the group with changes to its organizational structure. The Ministry welcomes the hosting of the Anguilla Nevis St. Kitts Association's reunion, ANSAR, in 2018 in the Federation. It will occur, I'm told, in June of 2018. To take advantage of this occasion, the Ministry, in consultation with the other relevant stakeholders, will co-host St. Kitts and Nevis's first diaspora conference. And what we hope to do is to engage our diaspora in a meaningful way, including our citizens under the Citizenship by Investment Program. When in my own reactions with them, Madam Deputy, many of them have never visited. Many of them have no real appreciation of the beauty of our country and the opportunities that our country provides. And so through this diaspora conference in 2018, we hope to bring as many people as we can to St. Kitts and Nevis, to renew bonds, and to assure them that they continue to be a critical component of what makes St. Kitts and Nevis great. It is envisaged, that a draft diaspora policy and a diaspora action plan will be the outcome documents that will serve as an impetus to increase diaspora engagement and involvement in the national developmental agenda, including the advancement of our youth. Protocol Unit. During the upcoming year, the Ministry intends to enhance its protocol and courtesy activities through the establishment of a unit equipped with well-trained personnel in the area of hospitality who will be operating from within the VIP lounge at the Robert Llewellyn International Airport. Protocol is a critical part of any nation's activities and its interaction, Madam Deputy Speaker, with other nations and with dignitaries from those nations. And so we have in discussions with SCASPA and with my friend and colleague from number 1, responsible minister, come to the view that we need to boost and enhance what we offer in terms of protocol at the RLB. And so we look forward certainly to engaging in a serious way on this particular matter in the new year. The National Mechanism to Follow Up on Universal Periodic Review Recommendations. You may recall, Madam Deputy Speaker, that St. Kitts and Nevis successfully participated in the first 2 cycles of the UPR in 2011 and 2015. The UPR is a UN mechanism with which all 193 member states must cooperate and participate in every 4.5 years by submitting a national human rights report and receiving feedback from other states. St. Kitts and Nevis will prepare to submit a midterm report in advance of its appearance at its 3rd review scheduled for 2020. After receiving the Cabinet's approval to establish a national mechanism for follow-up and review, a recommendation to states by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, the Ministry will launch this committee in the new year to heighten awareness about the UPR process as well as to prepare for the next cycle. You may be aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the current evidence regarding the added value of human rights for development. This accounts to some degree as to why St. Kitts and Nevis values this mechanism, as it serves as a platform to showcase to the world the government's policies and programs which protect and promote the rights of our citizens, irregardless of race, religion, gender, association, etc. regardless of those matters, we are promoting the human rights of our people. Indeed, the Constitution, which discourages discrimination, is the bedrock of our human rights outlook. On behalf of my ministries then, Madam Deputy Speaker, I extend sincere appreciation to the Honourable Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance and his ministry for the funds allocated to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation for the upcoming fiscal year, some $18.7 million. We pledge to use those funds prudently so that all of our goals for which are earmarked can be achieved for the benefit of the Federation and for all its people. Madam Deputy Speaker, that brings me to the end of my comments, my contribution. I wanted to wish this bill safe passage through this Honourable House, and before I take my seat, Madam Deputy, might I use the opportunity, the occasion of me standing here in this Parliament in my current capacity, to thank you and thank all the members, and to wish the members, the Chair, and the nation of St. Christopher and Nevis a wonderful Christmas. I believe that Christmas will be a blue Christmas this year, and I look forward certainly to the opportunity to come back in a different and more enhanced capacity on the next time that I have occasion to address this Honourable House. Thank you. May God bless you, and I wish this bill safe passage for this Honourable House.